Welcome to Autism Knows No Borders, a podcast where people connected to autism inspire change and build community. Together with the Global Autism Project, I'm your host, Rachel Harmon, a professional with over a decade of experience in the field of autism services, outreach, and advocacy. How can we navigate life's inevitable challenges more effectively? If you'd like to know how to be flexible and adapt to changing circumstances instead of rigidly resisting them, stick around for this episode with Dr. Stephen C. Hayes. Stephen Hayes is a clinical psychologist, a researcher, the originator of acceptance and commitment therapy and relational frame theory, and a co-developer of process-based therapy. He's spent the past 4 decades studying how to ease human suffering and empower people towards a life based on their own values. With 47 books and nearly 700 scientific articles published, Dr. Hayes is one of the most cited psychologists in the world, and his work has been celebrated with several prestigious awards. This episode is part 1 of my conversation with Stephen Hayes. We discuss how acceptance and commitment therapy works, the true meaning of acceptance, psychological flexibility and self-awareness as key to well-being and personal growth, and the importance of honoring your own personal journey. In this episode, discover what's possible when you flex your mind. And now, I present you Dr. Stephen Hayes.
Well, I'm Steve Hayes. I'm a recently retired clinical psychologist and by orientation a behavior analyst. And I've spent my life trying to figure out what is the smallest set of things that people can do that do the most good in the most areas for the most people. Sometimes I just say I've just been trying to hack the human mind. Sometimes it's more like trying to help people mobilize their resources to be the best selves that they can be. People usually think of me in terms of acceptance and commitment therapy or training, depending on the context in which it's used. Sometimes relational frame theory, the underlying basic science, contextual behavioral science, the larger set of knowledge development strategies that we put together, functional contextualism, the philosophy underneath all of it, process-based therapy, trying to expand some of that meta out into the world for people who aren't necessarily wanting to call themselves ACT people or behavior analysts or whatever. So yeah, that's who I am and what I do. I try to be useful to people around the world.
Great. Well, as a BCBA myself, I've been following your work for several years and listened to you on other podcasts, so it really is an honor to have you here on ours right now.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I've seen some of your work, and so I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. So for our listeners who aren't familiar, how would you describe acceptance and commitment therapy in more simple layman terms?
Well, let me take a step right before it and then answer, which is that, the tradition in the more behavioral approaches is not just to figure out how to make things happen, but why. We're the kind of why people. We want principles, we want processes, reinforcement, stimulus control, etc. We're really interested in techniques and methods and do they do good, but we also want to know functionally why and build from the bottom up. As soon as you get to languaging creatures, boy, the behavioral tradition stumbled badly, in my opinion. We're doing something here right now that's different than the birds outside the window. And what is that? And why does that matter? And how can you work with that if people are, need development on that or deal with its implications? And one of its implications is that when we developed as a species the ability to have knowledge, not by direct experience or by watching others, but by reference, by relations, by symbolic processes, we created a wonderful system for mastering the worlds around us and a train wreck for mastering the world within us. And so human misery, and you can see it, just explodes once human language and cognition is happening. You're going to die. You can compare yourself to others. You can always find yourself wanting or something wrong with you or whatever. And you start doing it really at a young age before you're very well protected and know that there's any alternatives, and you spend the rest of your life trying to deal with it. What acceptance and commitment therapy of training, when it's outside the clinical context, it's just called training to act in either case. Not ACT, by the way. It sounds to me like electroconvulsive therapy, and I'm old enough to have seen lots of those sessions as a clinical intern, and I don't like the association. But what it does is it tries to manage that clash between direct learning principles that are 500 million years old. We know that because all creatures since the Cambrian forward do operant classical conditioning, habituation, and so on. And this new kid on the block, which is pretty much apparently exclusive to human beings, the best we can tell. Maybe there's some spillover into some of the higher primates, but very little evidence of it. And it's a clash. So what acceptance and commitment therapy does is help people learn how to be more emotionally and cognitively open and flexible, even while they have processes telling them, yeah, I want to feel only the good stuff. Or what about this bad thought? How to come into the present moment in a way that brings you history and allows you to interact without disappearing into the past or the future and ruminating and worrying. And without putting on a clown suit and becoming the persona, the Greek mask that is in our personality as we try to present a particular way to the world so that we're accepted and part of the group. And instead help people find a deeper sense of self where you're okay who you are, and then it's a matter of learning. And we're never finished. And where you can be actively engaged in a life worth living as defined by the qualities of being and doing you want to put into the world, what you want to represent, be about, and creating habits around that. And then because we're biopsychosocial creatures, you got to also scale that to your relationships in your body. So I can say it in a simple sentence. Here's what we've learned after 45 years. Life is asking you to learn how to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a meaningful life, and scaling that to your relationships in your body. You can drop a pin on it, and that statement will include every known process that have been studied in careful randomized trials, etc., controlled studies, that is known to uplift and help people. And if that sounds a little extreme to make such a big sentence, I can defend it with the studies we've done, the meta-analyses we've done, the journey we've been on for 45 years. Long, long ago, listening to Fred Skinner and some major behavior analysts, I did a little pinky swear promise that I was going to do my best to figure out how language and cognition works and how it alters direct contingency principles, direct learning. Maybe it's just the prideful claims of an old man, but I'm sitting here as a 77-year-old saying, yeah, I think that's pretty cool that I can say not just what ACT has shown, but with all evidence-based behavior change methods have shown about how to be whole and free, how to be a whole human being. You can say it in a sentence now, and that doesn't necessarily make it easy to learn, but it helps a little bit. And that's a long, but hopefully ending up simple summary.
Yeah, thank you. You've stressed before the importance of psychological flexibility, that being the key to well-being. Can you talk about what this means in practice, and especially the distinction between, not just accepting when something happens to you, but using that to move forward?
Yeah, psychological flexibility in the modern form, and it keeps evolving because this is a scientific approach, and things we said 20 years ago or modified or even 10 years ago or 5 years ago, is the summary word for that sentence I said. It hangs some of the things on that tree of learning to be open, aware, and actively engaged in a meaningful life while scaling that to your relationships in your body. The name for that is psychological flexibility. And it probably needs a little better name because it minimizes the importance of social and cultural factors and biophysiological factors to just call it all psychological. Psychological is a particular level, and we're biopsychosocial. But that's where we are right now anyway. That's the overall name that we have for it. when you start talking about this set of skills, this set of things that people do who are on a journey upward in their life in terms of their flexibility to be all the things that human beings want to be, each of those words gets pulled back into, well, what does that mean? What is the definition? What is the edges? And because we're speaking in a language, if you made up all of the words, you might be able to, sometimes people think you could do it. You could define them all. But no, who's going to listen to you? You ask for a simple explanation. Open, aware, and active sounds pretty simple. Yeah, but open means lots of things. Take acceptance. It means lots of things, and it gets used lots of ways. And we say to people, you just have to accept it, which is almost the opposite of what we're talking about in acceptance and commitment therapy. There is an old English, an ancient English usage that is in the etymology of the word, and now it used to be used more regularly long, long ago. It comes from a Latin root that means to receive, as if to receive a gift. Subtere in Latin. And it is in English. I'll say a sentence or a context and you'll recognize it. If you had a precious, precious thing and you wanted to give it as a gift, your grandmother's ring to your bride-to-be, you might hold it out on a piece of velvet and say, here, will you accept this? You don't mean, will you tolerate it? Will you resign yourself to it? Can you put up with it? It's the exact opposite. You're asking, will you willingly receive it? Yes, I'm giving, and I know you'll take it. But I'm asking for something deeper because this is so precious to me. And I want to see that you understand that. That's what life is asking you to do with your own experiences, even the hard ones. Because that's the source of your wisdom. That's the source of your growth. Ultimately, that's the source of your freedom. And if you say no to your own experiences, you better learn to run faster than light so that you can be somewhere else other than where you are, because you're a historical creature, and those sort of brain injury, those, just don't pray for that, sort of brain injury, those experiences will follow you for the rest of your life. I'm sitting here right now thinking of a moment of embarrassment in kindergarten. The particulars doesn't matter. Well, I'll say it because it's so trivial, it's stupid, but you're talking about, other than brushing your teeth, how are some of the ways that you might be able to keep from having cavities? And I was thinking, you should rinse out your mouth really, really fast and spit out all the stuff in between your teeth. And I wasn't called on and I didn't say it. And then when they did call it on me, I kind of stumbled and didn't say it right. I'm 77 freaking years old. I was 4. Every single person, very likely, who was there is now dead, but still in my head. I said, what does that mean? It means nothing, but it does mean this. It means there's a part of us that wants to carry only the nice experiences where we had the right answers and where everybody clapped and you felt so included and worthy and up to speed. But a vast amount of our history is not like that. A lot of it, especially before we know how to navigate social relationships, how we know to, not lie or to build trust or to not be ashamed to say, I don't know, and to learn. So the importance of acceptance is it's a word for sitting with your own history and saying to the grandmother's ring on the velvet, yes, I will take it, even when it's hard. And so you allow the thorns because the rose is of such importance. Or you even learn from the thorns because that's part of it too. Anyway, it sounds flowery, but when you actually put it in practice, I think it's a matter of catching those moments where you have a little no, and flip it to a yes, and you take the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Every moment you do that, you get a little bigger. Your capacity, your freedom, your ability to move. I can have that, I can have that, I can have that. And if right here, right now, I mean, you were to say, I don't agree with that, or that's kind of a weird idea, or I don't understand you, and there's that little moment of, am I not being clear? Maybe I'm just talking out of my orifice, whatever, that you would know to allow yourself to be shaped, for example, to allow yourself to care about whether or not you're being clear. And the way that you'd show that is knowing when you're not, or being open to it, looking for signs of it, and sitting with it and trying to do a better job. So it's just a tiny example of a gazillion training moments that we've all been through.
And I imagine it takes does it take a certain minimal level of self-awareness to be able to first even just admit that there is that maybe dissonance happening and question things?
Yeah, there is. I mean, you can see it if you look at the work done with children who may not have language functions at a very high level at all, for example. Let's take it all the way down to the point where the person is unable yet, and here's where relational frame theory becomes important, to be able to sort of project themselves across time, past and future, and maybe place. So what's going to happen tonight at 4 when we drive to Aunt Mabel's house? Just can't quite navigate that. Once you're engaged, though, enough that perspective taking has started to kick in, then you're on a continuum. And no matter how big you get, there's more big to get. And you can have some guru on a mountaintop and they're still working on it. You'll work on it the rest of your life and you'll never get a prize and a ribbon stuck on your forehead. So working on being more aware, more open, more flexible is just a life task that never ends. And you can avoid the learning, but you'll pay the consequences for your lack of learning.
Hello, Rachel here. Would you like to share your own perspectives by participating in roundtables like this one? Join our online global autism community, a safe and judgment-free space where all kinds of people connected to autism regularly discuss important topics like autistic identity, dating on the spectrum, coping strategies, and many, many more. And as the new month approaches, we vote on which theme to discuss next. We'd love to see you over at community.globalautismproject.org. And now, back to the roundtable. Okay, Stephen, maybe let's get a little bit deeper into the meat of ACT so that people can have a better understanding of the impact. Could you talk a little bit about the core processes, the hexaflex?
Yeah. Well, I gave that sentence, and let's unpack the open, aware, and actively engaged. Each of those has 2 key processes in it, and they have features, and we keep adding things because we discover things. So open especially means cognitively flexible and emotionally flexible. By flexible, I mean that you have a repertoire that can be fitted to context that help moves you towards your goals are. In the area of emotion, that means being able to be open to emotions, neither clinging at positive ones as if your life depends on it or running away from so-called negative ones, learning from them both. But also without wallowing and spending all your time focusing on your emotions, being able to, we would say, regulate them, but by that I don't mean top-down control. I mean being able to enter into that world with a degree of comfort. By comfort, I don't mean feelings of ease, but I mean the etymology of the word, with your strength. Fort, building a fort, come with strength, come fort. With regard to thoughts, that means having enough separation between the part of you that it notices your thoughts, this witnessing, noticing part of yourself, and the content of them, so that they don't dominate you, but you don't ignore them, push them away, whatever. You use them when they're useful and not when they're not. You've got all kinds of thoughts in your head, and a lot of them are not attractive. And the capacity to think new thoughts is almost beyond imagination. I've done the math, and I won't walk through it here, but I could if you want to. You have more potential thoughts in your head, arguably, that there are molecules in the universe. So that's a pretty broad tableau of thoughts that you can have. And if you are able to be flexible, that means you can maximize your creativity and your ability to think different kind of things without disappearing into it, being overwhelmed. But you can have it regulated by what you're trying to accomplish. That's open. Aware means coming into the present moment, because that's where we live, knowing that you have that verbal repertoire that can go back to the past and the thing that happened when you were unable to talk about how to deal with your teeth in kindergarten other than brush your teeth. Or out into the future, what's going to happen if our politics keeps doing what I'm doing, if the world climate change keeps doing what we're doing, if the amount of immigration and economic disparities keeps doing what it's doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or just personal worries beyond these. But instead, be able to think about the past and the future, but come into the present. And to do that from a part of you, a kind of a deeper sense of self that shows up when you're able to move around across time, place, and person. This deeper witnessing, noticing, more spiritual sense of self that is beyond categorization. You're just here and aware. Or if you really want to talk about it this way, the part that connects you in consciousness to others. When eyes meet, that part. And so those four things I just mentioned, open and aware, but each of them has two aspects. That's probably what we're talking about with words like mindfulness. Mindfulness has become kind of a, it's to the point now where everybody yawns when they start talking about mindfulness. I mean, it's so much in the culture and so much used. I mean, they're literally selling mindfulness burgers. I mean, you can go buy one if you want. Stupid stuff like that. But there's something in there. And it isn't just the Buddhists, and it isn't just Eastern. It's all the wisdom traditions, all of them have methods for coming into the present in a way that reins in some of the excesses of language and allows you to see more options. Engaged means, okay, now that you're here and you've onboarded your history, the open part, I mean, these echoes of your history and your thoughts and your feelings brought into the present in a way that you can know what the context is consciously, whatever that word means. And I think we need to unpack that word, and I've tried to do that in a behavioral way. Let's bring that ability to allocate attention, to show up, to focus towards what are the qualities I want to reveal in my behavior. What are the qualities of being and doing? What are the intrinsic reinforcers? Like honestly, genuinely, lovingly, creatively. What are the leads, the qualities? It includes overt behavior in a more categorical sense. I want to be able to, solve that math problem or fix that car or paint that painting. But for a quality purpose, to appreciate beauty or to be able to master my environment in such a way that I get to travel around in a car that doesn't break down even though I don't have a lot of money or whatever the thing is. But to do that, once you're a little clearer on that, you're going to have to engage in a lot of behaviors. We're not babies just sitting in a crib. And so how do I acquire the habits to retain behaviors that have the qualities that I would like to manifest in the world? If I want to be loving and genuine, and then somebody's done something that's hurtful and I'm tempted to just be pissed off and condemn them, judge them, never be friends with them ever again, whatever. Okay, you can do that, but there may be other alternatives you want to work on. What do you do with hurt? What do you do with judgment? And is there a way to be loving even just as an example, when you've been let down by people who you care about? That's hard to navigate, and there's a lot to learn there. Now, if you do all that, then those skills also apply to the fact that you're a physical being. So if you're treating your body like shit, it's going to not treat you well. So diet, sleep, exercise, etc., learning, thinking, resting, pushing out the limits. And socially, it's means learning to do that in relationship and building teams and communities and cultures and neighborhoods and in the world in ways that support all those processes and reflect them, so that we create a more loving, creative, supportive world. The specifics of learning how to do it, and it's not just act, it turns out psychological flexibility, we've looked at this, as I mentioned, is what's underneath why things work in all of these different kind of training programs. And so that doesn't mean everything's act, but it means everything out there that works is behaviorally understandable. So you can be you. I mean, you can have your own methods, heroes, techniques, things you care about. But do look at what's out there. I mean, it's a little frustrating to me that the BCBAs sometimes are told that, ACT isn't behavioral, even though 40 years of research says otherwise. But also that here are a lot of techniques and methods and studies. I know randomized trials are not the end-all and be-all. Believe me, I know that. I've written a book on single-case designs, etc., but there's 14 freaking hundred of them, and only 20% are in the DSM. I mean, they're in things like winning a sports competition, or being able to run a business, or have a relationship that works, or dealing with a cancer diagnosis, and we're at a place now, go to the World Health Organization, the single most downloaded document in the entire World Health Organization website is an ACT self-help book called Doing What Matters in Times of Stress, and it's in the Ukraine right now. There's 250 people from the WHO putting in the Ukraine. And it's kind of a tragedy to me that behavior analysts aren't going, woohoo! It's like, no, that's not really behavioral. Okay, I guess. But meanwhile, I'm going to keep pushing, and the community keeps pushing. And so, can I mention just a couple things? Just in the last little bit, I'm on a rant here about why behavior analysts should care. One of the reasons why is all of that research has shown that it matters. And the other is that it gives us a chance to move into the center and actually be listened to. We've been at the edges. People think we're dead. I mean, actually think we're dead. They write sentences like, that was before, cognitive killed off behaviors. And that means you're dead, right? Right here, right now, DeepSeek is using reinforcement methods to develop things that are doing better than these big, large language learning models, etc. And they're almost completely unaware that there's a whole science of that in relational frame theory. I'm building relationships with these people, the cognitive scientists of the present day. But the two I wanted to mention was there were arguably the second biggest impact behavior analytic article that ever has occurred, and it entered without a ripple in behavior analysis, was showing that ACT-based parent training with parents of newly diagnosed persons on the spectrum is particularly effective. And it was published in a journal with an impact factor about 25 times higher than JF or Java. We shouldn't be worshiping the impact factor, but it's like when the mainstream starts saying yes, yes, and then the people who created it say that has nothing to do with us. There's something tragic going on. Another one just was a study showing that you can take these methods and put them into chronic diseases for which medicine has no alternative. It was done with motor neuron disease. If you get it, you're going to die within 3 years. It's a death sentence in mainstream. Medicine can do nothing. And an ACT protocol lifted up the lives of those human beings so significantly, and it even looked as though it was helping the disease process, it wasn't. It was just motivating them to get out of bed and keep living. Because 3 years of living is 3 years of living, not 3 years of dying. If it's 3 years of dying, then you're dying right now. So am I. Okay, you want to think about life that way, that's fine. But another way to think about it is we're living while we're alive. And why am I mentioning that one? Because behavior analysts had a history of taking the downtrodden, taking the people who nobody cares about. This will be horrifying to say, but I'm going to do it. When I got entered into clinical psychology, my mentor was John Cohn, one of the creators of behavioral assessment. And he had a whole system of behavioral assessment for persons who were intellectually disabled, I guess they would call it. Well, back then they used other words. And I visited the place in Ohio, as in West Virginia, where he had the whole center. And I entered into, and I almost cried talking about it, into rooms that had concrete walls with children in underwear, smelling of urine, who are cleaned up by bringing in a hose and hosing them down. That was the care delivered to people. Wow. Can you imagine? That was the standard of care. And the only people who gave a shit about it were behavior analysts. Everybody else just, I decided not to work in that area. My mentor allowed me to do work in environmental problems because I was an environmental activist. So I did research on energy usage and stuff, even though it was in clinical. But my point being, ACT could go wherever human beings go. Once they pass that threshold, an RFT can go to the very, very beginning and help people get to that threshold. And behavior analysis writ large has always been about that. High precision, high scope principles that allow us to put our caring everywhere where human beings need it. And if that's the chronically mentally ill, we went there. If that was persons who were in rooms being hosed down, we went there. And yeah, we made some mistakes. We did. I mean, we did the be still, quiet, be docile thing where teaching kids to sit in their chair, and it turns out they don't learn anymore when you do that. It just doesn't bother the teachers.
I think with the bravery of a lot of autistic self-advocates who are speaking up now, whether they experienced ABA therapy or not, just speaking up about their lived experience and what it's like to be autistic and told they're wrong or they're not good enough all of their lives. It's teaching us how we can do better. So, Stephen, I just wanted to go back to that study that you mentioned about parents, because I actually wanted to talk about how ACT can help families, specifically in that accepting the diagnosis, processing that with their family. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, because of this top-down normative categorical thinking that's in our culture and our kitchen tables, that we as psychologists and behavioral scientists have trained the entire world to think in terms of. The shock that happens when the pediatrician drops those words in there includes all kinds of worries, comparisons, judgments, fears, etc. And it's shared with parents receiving many, 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 many other things. It isn't unique, but it's characteristic, and people need to be supported in of being able to sit with what happens when those words drop in emotionally, where your mind takes you, worries, concerns, what will happen in the future, judgments, this is awful, I don't think I can do it, blah, 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 whatever. What about all the worries, etc. And, take them on board and then come to a posture that's more in the present and values-based, which is life is asking you to be a good parent here, and let's see. And that posture means tolerating some ambiguity. You don't know. I don't know. And it means one step at a time. And can we do that in a way that's values-based, that is loving and caring and supportive and compassionate? And while, not making the other mistakes. I mean, sometimes you have parents saying, oh, well, my child has suffered so much already. Who am I to put that on extinction, let's say? When you have some behavior that clearly is not harmful, all parents have to learn how to set limits. You do. That's part of raising children. And what parent training will help you do at its best is to navigate that. And what that can do when you combine it with that, at its best, there's lots of parent training that you worry about. I mean, this be still, be calm, be quiet, be docile. It's Dick Lynette and Winkler, Whitman Winkler, I forget his first name, but classic. Go read it if you've never heard the title. Just type in Google Scholar, be still, be quiet, be docile. One of the earliest complaints about, as behavior analysts, let's never be the norm police. That is not our role. To just do the dirty bidding of the culture and enforcing arbitrary norms on people. A huge mistake, and we've done too much of it. So empowering parents means, I think, the behavioral programming they need to be good parents, evidence-based, and hopefully not into this just forcing norm kind of posture, but empowering child development. And parents are feeling, thinking, relating human beings, and they need to be supported in a really, really, really hard job. I've set the Guinness Book of World Records. Little Stevie went to Purdue. Back to his sophomore year. My wife and I had dropped him off. He's in computers science and game design. And here in a few months, my eldest will turn 56. And I've had children in the home since Stevie left for 55 straight years. 18 or under, depending on my wallet. And it's the hardest job that's out there. And behavior analysts sometimes think that what they should do is wag fingers at parents and tell them to follow a program. And if they start crying, they wait for it to stop, or they refer them to a social worker. Or they just start talking mentalistically. Oh, don't think about it. Is that in a behavioral principles text? Stop being, why did you just say stop being such a crybaby? I mean, how far are you going to take it, really? Or, they're there, and everything stops because somebody's crying. No, what do you do with the pain of uncertainty about your children's future? What do you do with that? A really, really healthy thing to do with that is to onboard it and to allow it to touch those values. And then in the morning when you have another day and there's some hard work to do there, you step forward, not because there's a wagging finger, but because your heart takes you there. You do it out of love, and it's a lot easier to carry the weight of being a good parent out of love than it is out of guilt or shame or wagging fingers from behavior analysts who are going to show up in a week and criticize you for not following the program. So it humanizes, and that's when you do that, you just get better outcomes because we're more at our best when we're in touch with our values, and we can be more open, aware, and actively engaged as a parent or as a behavior analyst who's very often overworked, underpaid, and stressed. Okay, applies to you too. And if we can do that in a way that is based on principles and increasingly is based on our understanding of the particular life journeys we're dealing with, including of the behavior analysts, I think we have a chance to turn the boat a little bit of normative categorical thinking that has had such a harmful cost on human culture towards one where every voice matters and nobody's an heir turn.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to Autism Knows No Borders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and come back next Thursday for part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Stephen Hayes, where we discuss how acceptance and commitment therapy can help autistic people. Thanks for listening. Take care.